NewsNation contributor and veteran political and media strategist Kurt Bardella, along with Republican strategist and radio host Malik Abdul. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here. I want to start with the tone right out of the gate. I mean, do these two come out swinging or do we see restraint? Kurt, let me start with you. And what do you think is the right balance to strike?
Well, I think that every advisor who's working for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden is trying to convince both of them to be as presidential as possible, at least to start. I think everyone expects that as the debate progresses, as people get on each other's nerves, as you get a little bit more relaxed and into that format, that's when you start seeing things kind of get more mixed up, more extemporaneous. I expect the first opening moments of this debate, though, to be a little bit more scripted. Now, the one thing we know about Donald Trump, his style is very aggressive. Very in your face, very alpha male, if you will. So it wouldn't shock me if he decides, you know what, instead of trying to be presidential, I'm just going to go out there swinging, try to show everyone how frail, fragile, and old Joe Biden is, rather than let him ease into it. I think that the Biden team will be well prepped for that type of line of attack from Donald Trump, and that he will meet that measure. In a lot of ways, I think they're just going to cancel each other out ultimately. Whatever one does, the other one will do. No one's going to have a significant advantage over the other.
Malik, what do you think we'll learn in the first minute of this debate about how the tone will be set?
I actually agree with Kurt on this. I believe that they're going to come out a bit less hot. If it does progress during the debate, that's a different story. But I don't think that either one of them, and of course, if I was advising Donald Trump, I certainly wouldn't advise for him to come out hot, because then where do you go from there? I think that Donald Trump, what he's actually focusing on as far as his debate prep, that may actually benefit him, considering the restraints that they have around the debate itself, constraints that they have around the debate itself. Donald Trump won't have an audience. Donald Trump, neither one of them will be able to respond to the other because the mics are going to be cut off. So this actually gives Donald Trump the opportunity to be more disciplined. And as he's been having these various interviews on podcasts and others to discuss actual policy, it may actually benefit him because of the fact that the expectations for Donald Trump are so low. He goes into this debate as the underdog. So it gives him the opportunity to overperform. And I actually think that he will.
Kurt, does the incumbent always have a tougher row to hoe? I mean, we've seen an ad already leaked coming out from the Trump campaign that he'll focus on the economy, crime, national security, how people feel now versus 4 years ago. What will be the challenge for Biden tonight on those important issues?
Well, I mean, I think it remains to be seen whether or not Trump will actually be able to execute that plan. Everyone goes into these things with an idea, a roadmap, if you will, of what they'll talk about. One thing we know about Donald Trump is say whatever he wants, and I think that's his challenge. I think for President Biden, it's connecting the dot of, hey, understanding and showing, yeah, people are struggling right now. It's not great right now. People don't feel good about the economy. They don't feel good about their own personal situation. You don't want to look out of touch like you're completely aloof. But on the flip side of it, you also got to lay some of the blame at the feet of Donald Trump or Republicans. Immigration is a good example. We had a bipartisan immigration bill. This guy over here said, don't vote for it. Don't do anything until I'm in office. It's trying to find that balance of acknowledging there are challenges, but also redirecting some of the responsibility at your opponent.
You know, I spoke, Malik, to some independent voters, some undecided voters, even Republican voters who had voted for Trump once but are concerned about January 6th and his behavior on January 6th and since then denying the election results. How critical will the Supreme Court's decisions that we're still waiting on immunity and January 6th factor into tonight's debate, and how do you expect Trump to respond?
So I believe, obviously, it will either be Joe Biden or the moderators will ask one or two of those questions about January 6th, or they'll ask him, do you believe that the election was stolen? Will you accept the results of the election? I absolutely believe, and those are gifts to Joe Biden. But Donald Trump has to be able to answer those questions, answer the question, and pivot and move on. I think if Donald Trump gets caught up in trying to explain what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, state Supreme Court found around as far as, ballot boxes, or was trying to explain something in Arizona, people will have zoned it out by that point. So he doesn't need to get caught up on that. And on January 6th, he needs to talk about holding the people responsible who did criminal things, who actually did violent things on January 6th. But he cannot get bogged down in it. The goal will be to get Donald Trump bogged down in that. But if Donald Trump just pivots and moves on to something else with such a limited amount of time to answer a question, I think that will better serve Donald Trump.
I firmly believe that we're always in an election cycle, right? I mean, it's just the nature of what we do. We're always talking about the next election. But how does having a debate this early, even before the conventions, impact an election? Kurt, let me go to you on this one.
Yeah, there are a few things here. One, if one of the candidates, whichever side you're on, has a bad night, there's such a long runway until November that by the time we get there, no one's going to remember what the heck happened at a debate in June, frankly, unless something extraordinary were to happen. So it's kind of a padding, really, for each side to go, hey, we're going to have this debate. We're going to check that box. But if either one of us has a bad night, which is frankly possible, both of them could have a bad night, frankly, there's so much time between now and November that you can course correct and overcome that and move on from that. And I think that's really the value of both candidates. It's kind of a safety measure that they have, where whatever happens tonight, there's so much that's going to go on, my God, between now and even just the conventions that it's going to be, by the time we get to the convention, this debate's going to be a distant memory.
Yeah. And Malik, I'm going to end with you. That same panel of voters that we're going to hear from again in a moment, one of the independents, or excuse me, a Democratic voter, but who is undecided, said she's concerned about President Biden's frailty, right? His age, but not just age, but how he looks on stage, and the possibility that in the next 4 years, we could be looking at a potential of a first female president, Kamala Harris. That was her words. She's concerned about that. How will Biden address that elephant in the room tonight?
I think the only thing that Biden can do to combat that is to show a strong Joe Biden for 90 minutes on stage. Joe Biden being able to command the stage for 90 minutes and doing similar to what he did in the State of the Union speech, where whether he was juiced up or not, Joe Biden was present and in the moment. If there are any instances of Joe Biden slurring or getting lost in thoughts or freezing or any of those kind of quote unquote senior moments, that will hurt Joe Biden. But if he can show that he's strong like the State of the Union, it will benefit him.
I have senior moments, and I'm half their age, but I'm not running for president. Go ahead, Kurt.
If the narrative after the debate is that Joe Biden did swell because he was on drugs, that's a win for Joe Biden.
All right. Well, I'm going to be pumping the caffeine to stay up for this one. Great to talk to you both. Thanks for the lively discussion, Kurt and